express my pleasure to invite the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Josienso Ramokgopa, to deliver the guest lecture this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me take the opportunity to extend my warm and sincere greetings to the Red. Thanks for allowing us an opportunity to have this occasion to share with you and more significantly with the students the work that we are doing on the energy front. To be part of the resuscitation of the South African economy. As you can imagine, energy is the oxygen that breathes life into any economy. Prof. Anika, Prof. Christina, and the rest of the eminent professors that are here present, also just to extend my greetings to the students. Of course, Prof, I would have wanted to be there, and unfortunately our cabinet meeting took much longer than anticipated. This lecture is just too important for us to postpone, and I guess that the technology allows us to be able to transmit this lecture in the manner that we are doing now. So I really want to extend my sincere apologies. I think more physical interaction would have been more ideal, but I guess that technology does allow us to bridge that gap. So why are we here? As indicated, I think the country is emerging from an exceptionally difficult period of high and intense period of electricity supply deficit. So supply was unable to meet demand, and as we call it, we had to initiate what we call load shedding, which is an orchestrated effort on the part of our state-owned enterprise, that is Eskom, to deny consumers, both industry and household, their rights to electricity in order to protect the grid. And what has been the net result of that is that the economy has not been growing at the rate that is desired. In fact, if anything, there's been significant contraction of the economy. We have seen that a lot of industries have reduced their capacity utilization and or have closed their businesses, and that has resulted in the hemorrhaging of the much needed jobs. And you can see it in the jobs numbers that the official unemployment number is at a record high. And in fact, just yesterday, the quarterly labor force survey suggests that there's 1.3 percentage point increase in the unemployment in the country. So it's an existential problem that's confronting us. The South African Reserve Bank, the National Treasury, and some of the multinational finance institutions attempted to compute what has been the rent value of the cost of load shedding. Depending on you read, you'll see that the numbers span from anything from 800 million to 1.4 billion rands a day in losses to the South African economy. So whichever number you're using, whether it's the lower number, that is significant, especially in an environment where we want to inject the life into the South African economy. So we had to embark on a path to recover the South African electricity supply, and by extension ensure that industries is able to receive electricity, households are able to receive electricity as desired. I'm sure you know that household consumption constitutes about 60% of the country's GDP. So it was important that we resolve this question. The president introduced an electricity action plan, which had 5 outcomes. The first one was to fix Eskom. The second one was to ensure that we accelerate the private sector investment into a new generation capacity. The third one was to accelerate public procurement of new generation capacity. The fourth one was to ensure that we increase the rate of rooftop solar installation. So if you like, behind the meter intervention. So that's a demand side intervention. And the last one has to do with the unbundling of Eskom, the creation of a competitive market so that we don't rely on a monopoly. So I'm going to take you through that journey, but also make the case that
there are significant risks on the supply side, and those risks have to do with industry readiness, but more significantly, and this is why we are here today, is that we are going to run out of the skills that are required to support this recovery and the ambitious build program that Cabinet has approved. So as Mr. Pile has made the point, we want to enter into a compacting with institutions of higher learning, but most importantly, yourselves as students. I want to make the case that you have a future in this country. And in fact, you are indispensable to the future of this country. So I'm advancing a hypothesis that for us to be able to achieve this level of ambition, we need to accelerate the pipeline of engineers across all disciplines. Technicians are going to be key in the work that we're doing, and hopefully I'll be able to make the case, and you might reconsider your decision to look for opportunities abroad. This is your home. A lot of you don't have 2 passports. This is your home, and we're really looking forward to you bringing your skills to bear to help us to achieve this level of ambition. So let me start by framing the discussion. So remember that hitherto what we're resolving was the issue of supply side. So we're trying to resolve the supply of electricity to meet the demand as a result of the constraints brought about by our inability to make the necessary investments to refurbish, rehabilitate, and maintain our existing fleet of power plants that are generating the electricity. And this abandonment of a more orchestrated investment stretches over a period of time, over 15 years of underinvestment. And the cumulative effect is that these machines could not produce, and as a result, we could not keep the lights on, and then we undermine South Africa's economy. What this slide attempts to do, so if you were to use a 2-dimensional Cartesian plane, just the graph on your left, it maps rather the relationship between electricity consumption per capita and the GDP per capita. So on your x-axis, the GDP per capita, on your y-axis is electricity consumption per capita. What is the story conveyed by this slide? Of course, you might not see it. The legend might not be as visible. The presentation will be made available. Allow me to interpret it on your behalf. So the net result is that if you want to be economy rich, then you have to have a significant electricity surplus, that the electricity must be available and it must be of quality, and that allows, if you like, consumers to be able to consume it. And as they consume and the electricity is available, the relationship is such that the greater per capita consumption, the greater your GDP. And that's why you see on your top right-hand corner, your Norway, Qatar there, the middle countries, New Zealand, Australia, the UAE. And then what is the concentration, the density of those countries there? It's Africa and Latin America, or South America rather. So you can see that where you have countries where per capita consumption is low, GDP is also low. So they've established, what the graph does, establish a relationship of direct proportionality. The higher the per capita consumption, the higher the GDP. It doesn't attempt to argue that there's a relationship of causality. And I'm going to illustrate much later that, in fact, that's a plausible proposition, that there's a relationship of causality. If electricity per capita consumption is high, that will result in a GDP that is higher. And then on the right is a computation, a much more broader computation, because GDP really, if you come to think of it, it just uses in large part financial matrices. So we wanted to expand it, and what the slide on the right does, it establishes the relationship between Human Development Index. As you know, HDI talks to the level of access with regards to quality healthcare, education. You mentioned them. if you like, some of the social indicators. So what that graph does, it also confirms that there is that relationship of direct proportionality per capita electricity consumption, the greater the human development index. Again, you can see what is concentrated in that red box, if you like. You are again New Zealand, Australia, and all those countries, and then you begin to see as it tapers down, where there's a low human development index and low per capita consumption. You find countries like Somalia, which are really war ravaged, if you like, and really it's largely African countries, and in particular Sub-Sahara, just to be explicit. So why am I presenting this? I'm presenting this so that there's an appreciation that we're essentially resolving an economic question, but we're using an electricity lens, not even a broader energy lens, just an electricity lens, to show that if the lights are off, you are unlikely going to grow the economy. You are deteriorating and eroding the quality of life of citizens. If we go to the next slide again, just as an attempt to just bring it closer to home. I mean, I was just giving you a global picture, so let me bring it home to the continent, so that the comparisons are a bit more realistic, because essentially comparing countries at the same level of development. Again, we're using the two-dimensional Cartesian plane. So on your left, what that does, again, it's an average consumption per inhabitant. That's what gets to be plotted on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis is electricity access. So what is the story told by this graph? Is that sub-Saharan Africa is experiencing significant amount of electricity deficit. If you didn't know, we are 1.4 billion people on the continent, and only 600 million people have got access to electricity. About 1 billion people don't have access to clean cooking. So they rely on fetching wood, they rely on coal, they rely on measures that are not safe, and it affects their health. And in fact, the World Health Organization has computed that on the continent, there's about 500,000 premature deaths per annum as a result of lack of clean cooking solutions. So what do we see there? We see that sub-Saharan Africa is really concentrated. There's low levels of electricity access. There's low levels of per capita consumption. So what you see there at the top, really, South Africa is in the company of countries north of the Sahara. So which are those countries? Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. They've got higher access to electricity, and also per capita consumption is higher. But our per capita, although our access to electricity, so the percentage of households that have got access to electricity, we're sitting at about 93%. They are closer to 100%. But you see that our per capita electricity consumption is high. Why is that the case? It's the case because we're the most industrialized economy on the continent. So a big part of our consumption is taken by industry. In fact, if you transition to the graph on your right, you see that South Africa accounts for over total 20% of electricity demand on the continent. So if you put all of the 54 countries together, 1 in every 5 electrons, that is the demand of electrons, is here in South Africa. And in fact, our installed capacity is sub-Saharan. So when I say sub-Saharan, south of the Sahara Desert, I'm sure you're familiar with the map of the continent. Our installed capacity is about 75% of the total that is installed in the region. And if you include the rest of the continent, so you go to Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, you are going to find that that number is still about half of the total installed capacity. Why is the message there? That South Africa has always been the battery of the region. So we're supplying all of our neighbors with with electricity. We are a net exporter of electricity, and in some of our neighbors, we supply over 70% of the electricity demand. So what that means is that if South Africa is having significant challenges on the electricity supply side, it affects the region, and our ambition to industrialize then gets to be eroded. If we go to the next slide, the next slide just brings us closer to the current geopolitics. So I'm building up to really making the case why South Africa should remain your home once you complete your studies, and that the future looks bright. Notwithstanding the challenges we're going through. What's the geopolitical context? You are familiar with what is unfolding in the rest of the world, starting with the Russia-Ukraine war. Really, what Russia did was to weaponize energy by cutting supply of gas to major European powers. The Nord Stream gas pipeline, what Russia did was to cut that because they wanted to put pressure on those sovereign countries not to stand behind Ukraine, essentially abandon Ukraine. So the point I'm making is that there's greater weaponization of energy. What are we seeing now in the war on the one side, Israel and America, on the other side is Iran. So what are the first installations that were targeted? The installations that were targeted on both sides of the equation. Of course, outside the more tragic attacks on the children there in Iran is that the energy infrastructure was targeted. Energy infrastructure was targeted. The Iranians responded by targeting energy infrastructure. So essentially what they were attempting to do was to inflict pain on the rest of the world. So we can stand back and say, we're neutral parties, we have nothing to do with the war there, but we are feeling the pain, all of us now. We're feeling it at the palm. So we're drawn into that fight, not necessarily as the protagonist or the belligerents, but we have an interest in the resolution of that war. Why is President Trump visiting President Xi today? It's not just a request to build diplomatic relations, it's to resolve an existential problem, that of the supply of energy to the world. So the Chinese get a significant proportion share of their energy requirements from the Gulf states. And we know that when the energy prices go up also at the prices at the pump. You have seen the inflation numbers there in the US gone up 3.8%. That's the level of inflation about the highest in recent memory. What that does, it undermines the political standing of the incumbents. So the war is really about the energy complex. What we know again, with regards to developments in the world, is that there's a new attitude on how you relate to nuclear. So three major things have happened in the recent past. The first one is that we have changed our language. I'm sorry about that. We've tampered with the taxonomy of what constitutes green. So now we have come to accept that nuclear is green. And of course, I'm just saying, we have always known, I think as engineers and scientists, that nuclear is green. But then the powers that be have arrived at that admission. The second one is that all the major powers in the world have agreed to triple the installed capacity of nuclear by 2050. I'm sure you have seen other countries in Europe, they are renationalizing their nuclear assets. One of the major countries in Europe has gone to the legislature because they had built in their law that they will not enter into anything that has to do with nuclear, even if it's for peaceful purposes. I'm referring to Germany. They are revising that position to say we need to participate there for purposes of energy security. We want to insulate ourselves from externalities, and they've had that direct experience with Russia. The Russia-Ukraine war, they're having that direct experience now with what is happening in Iran, Israel, and the fight that is backed by the US. So it's a major development. The third development on the nuclear front is that all the major financing houses, in particular the World Bank, have agreed that now they'll participate in financing nuclear going forward. So it's a big part of how we rethink the energy mix, because that which stood before us or undermined our ability as a country to explore and exploit nuclear as a nuclear capacity expanded as an energy source, all those hurdles have been removed. So now we've got, if you like, a runway for that allows us to pursue that. And I'll share with you what that looks like. Of course, what is a risk there is that we have not produced the skills. If you are not 80 years old in this room, you will not have participated in the building of a nuclear reactor in this country. Why is that the case? The Eskom Unit 1 is 42 years old, the reactor. And then unit number 2 is 41 years old. So it means that none of, if you completed your engineering degree at the age of 25, then you must be 65 if you worked on the Eskom build program. But the kind of experience that is required, it meant that for you to actively lead the build program, if you are still alive, you'll be at 80 years of age. Why is that important? It is important because later I'll show you that we want to build 5,200 megawatts of nuclear capacity. Of course, we're going to extend that, expand it to 10,000 megawatts. What is the risk? The risk is that no one has built a reactor in this country. So we have Kubek, the 2 reactors that give us electricity. We have the research reactor in Pelindaba Safari, responsible for the production of isotopes that are used in the oncology, which is a branch of medicine that is concerned with the detection and curing of cancers. That research reactor is 60 years of age. So it's one thing to look after a reactor that is operating. It's quite another to build a new reactor. That's one. If you are studying civil engineering there, like myself as a civil engineer, I majored in structures. How you do your basement layers, building an N1 freeway, expanding it, it's a completely different engineering requirement than building a foundation for a research reactor. So no one has that experience. So that's the risk that we have. And who's building? The Chinese are building. The French are building, the Koreans are building, the Indians are building, the Americans, well, they have not built recently. We know that Egypt is building, but it's really the Russians that are building. So if we were to go out tomorrow, which we will, by the way, there's only 5 vendor countries that will respond. It's China, South Korea, India, Russia, that are going to come to the party. So we've depleted that capability. We have abandoned our pebble bed modular reactor, which is a forerunner to the technology that is called small modular reactors. The high pressure reactors as complementing the pressurized water reactors, which is what is at Kubek. We had spent 12 billion into that program. We abandoned it, and the skills left us. And that's why we are looking to Prof to help us to resolve that problem. And the people to resolve that problem is you in the audience. Otherwise, I'll talk about these things, and then we're going to export the jobs. So the point we're making is that your future is here. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide also talks to what are on the demand side. So you know that data centers are the biggest consumers of electricity in the world. When I was in Davos early this year, I met my Portuguese counterpart, the Minister of Electricity, Energy in Portugal. He was telling me that he's got an application on his desk for one data center. The energy requirement for that one data center is 20% of the installed capacity of Portugal. The Americans are driving this data center. The Chinese are competing with them. We are consuming AI is the biggest driver of data center. What do we know about data centers as I speak to you now? Is that the biggest attraction to data centers, or rather what makes data centers work now is electricity. So whoever offers a reliable and really don't talk, even if you remove affordable, if you guarantee them electricity, they will come. Of course, they also want it cleaner and greener. And that's why the Saudi Arabia and UAE are building some of the biggest data centers. And the biggest investors are American tech companies that are on the AI side. Again, the Chinese, they are driving that also in China. So the one jurisdiction that presents an opportunity going forward is ourselves. Remember what the Gulf states have positioned themselves first is that they are cash flush, so they can build these data centers. Secondly is that really it's a desert there, and then we know that the quality of irradiation, I'll show you later, it's healthier there in the Gulf states. So I'm really talking UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. I'm really talking those countries. Yemen is war ravaged, but it has the potential on the quality of renewable energy sources. But one of their selling points why they say come to the Gulf state was that it is stable. Now we have seen with the Iraq war that indeed it's not. What did what part of the attacks, in addition to energy infrastructure, the Iranians attacked the data centers. They were really attacking the Americans. I'm just saying, don't divorce the conversation from the broader geopolitical question. So we're saying we are there, South Africa. We have a proud industrial base, technology, skills, of course, like notwithstanding what I said earlier on, we have built Sasol, we have built Transnet, we have built Eskom, so we know what we're doing. It's a safe haven, your investment will be protected, one of the most advanced financial sectors. We are a constitutional democracy, there's law and order. If there's a contractual dispute, you can go to the courts to arbitrate. The courts will find in favor of a party that justifies his or her argument. So we are ready to do that. So the data centers are going to drive this. So it's an area of a new demand. What is the second area of new demand? We are decarbonizing across the world. You know that South Africa industrialized on the back of fossil fuels, got cheap electricity because of the endowments on coal, but we also are going to decarbonize. So the critical minerals that are going to be a foundational input to this transition we are talking about, they are really found on the continent, and a significant part of those also found in South Africa. That's but some of the example. In the DRC, you have lithium. Namibia, you also find uranium. Remember, uranium is the one that we convert from its solid form, we gasify it, we enrich it, and all of that. I'll show you that fuel cycle. So you find these resources here. So when we talk about beneficiation at source, ensuring that there's value addition and transformation of these minerals so that they can go into your wind turbines, they can go into the manufacturing of PVs. They are the electrolyzers for purposes of green hydrogen. They are found on the continent. But if you don't have electricity, you can't beneficiate. And if that electricity is not affordable, you can't beneficiate. That's why we are exporting jobs. How are we exporting jobs? We take raw materials out. Primarily, the primary destination is China. They transform it. That's why you create high-end jobs and they bring it back as a finished product. So I'm saying we are resolving the demand side is there. As we go to the next slide, why do we have an advantage as a country? That's a map of the world. Again, the legend might not be as clear for yourselves there. So you see the pink there. So the legend shows that when you are on the pink there, there's a potential to generate about 7.4 kilowatt per square meter daily. And then it tapers where it's green really. There's no significant energy resources. What does the map tell us? There are 5 geographic locations where you have the best quality of solar irradiation. What the computation here talks about the global horizontal irradiation. So it's a total amount of short wave PV irradiation received over a flat surface. That's why really what that is. Since you are engineers, you relate to this. In simple English, is the quality of the yield. What is the return I'm getting per square meter if I were to build this solar PV? It says that per square meter in Chile, you see the pink there, Sahara Desert, the Gulf states, the Australian outback there, and then there's a pink there on the African continent, is the corridor between the Northern Cape and Namibia. So we're competing with all those jurisdictions. And of course, the red simply means we still are in the game. You can see almost the whole of South Africa is red getting to orange. The best quality radiation is found in our country. Look at Europe, it's green, there's really nothing of significant quality. And yet, the injustice in this place is that Africa can provide up to 60% of the total requirement for renewable energy, PV, and yet the investments on the continent is 1%. So all I'm saying is that the science is with us to say this is the best location. No amount of money can buy you this map on where the quality of irradiation is. The one on your right is the wind. So you can get up to 10 meters per square meter of wind speed. Again, you found it there. You can see the Northern Cape going into Namibia. Again, on your the eastern coastline there, you can see the Eastern Cape and that. So the point we're making is that there's good quality radiation. So we've got everything going for us. So it's the decisions we make on how best we are going to exploit that. So we have the minerals, and then we have the renewable energy requirements. We have a nuclear capability. Of course, like I said, we have lost that ability over time from a skills point of view. Namibia, ourselves, and Niger, on the continent, over 40% of uranium deposit. So there's a need for us to rethink how we can play in this new energy complex as we go to the next slide. The next slide really here, just trying to show you that we've built significant pipeline of renewable energy in the country. Why is this important? It's important so that investors, when they come into our country, they should know that we have done this before. So we're not starting. So it's not virgin territory. As I speak to you now, we've got 7 gigawatts of installed capacity. There's private sector installed capacity connected to the grid of 4 gigawatts. There's also about behind the meter interventions that have been made in our country. So we've got a total of close to about 16, 17 gigawatts of generation capacity. We have done this before. And in fact, going into the future, we do anticipate that we are going to grow this significantly. We have just approved the IRP late last year. Between now and 2030, we'll add 30 gigawatts of new capacity. 8.9 will be wind, 11.1 will be PV, 4,500 will be battery, 6 gigawatts will be gas to power. So I'm saying there's a pipeline. And there's an opportunity for yourselves as students and the academia to contribute to the pipelines of skills that's going to support this agenda. That bill program is about 2.2 trillion rands of a bill program. Put that into context. The size of the South African GDP is about 7.5 trillion rands. 2.2 trillion rands, that's about 28% of South Africa's GDP. That's what we'll be spending in the next 10 years. And that's why I make the point that this is your home. We want you to make the contribution. The next slide talks to, we have agreed that we are going to build transmission line. So if you look at the transmission configuration, it's concentrated in the northeastern part because that's where you find your coal-fired power stations. I just showed you now that your renewable energy resources, the healthier renewable energy resources are in the Northern Cape and the Cape, and the Cape provinces, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and Western Cape. We don't have grid capacity there. So we need to build about 14,000 kilometers of new lines. We need about 133 MVA of new transformer capacity. So what's the point I'm making? This the cabinet meeting I was referring to earlier on, we're resolving on South Africa's industrial policy. that we must localize the manufacturing of transformers, pylons, wires, and all the associated, the wind towers must be localized here because we've got demand. Just the transmission alone is about 440 billion rand. I said new generation capacity, we want to take it to 102 gigawatts in the next 15 years, but in the next 5 years up to 2030 is 30 gigawatts. The size of that ticket on new generation is 2.2 trillion. On the transmission side is 440 billion. So you're talking about 2.7 trillion rands of new investment. We want to localize. Those of you in the room who've got ambition of building turbines, wind towers, the blades and that, we're saying here's a demand we have created for you. So there's no reason for you to go and look somewhere else when in fact the opportunity are here at home. The next slide really is a repeat of what I was saying, just pulling all of these things into one single window. But the point we're making in addition is that battery storage is going to be a big part. I said over time we're going to do about 8,000 megawatts of new battery capacity. The green hydrogen, a big part of the work that we are doing. We have committed to electric vehicles, the supply chains. So the point I'm making is that everything is working for us on the demand side. Our biggest risk is on the supply side. We can have all of these excellent ambitions and bring the money. But if the skills are not there, it means that it's the Chinese, the Europeans, the Americans who will benefit from this. Is it wrong for them to participate? Absolutely nothing wrong. We ourselves will not be able to consume all of this. But for a start, we need to ensure that we maximize our own domestic capability. Then we invite others to come and work with us. So it's not an anti-Chinese, American, European participation. We want them to be here. They are highly invested in this country. Our auto sector, the OEMs, is the Germans, is the Japanese, is the American, is Ford, the Americans, the Japanese. They are here, Toyota and Nissan, and is the Germans, Mercedes, Volkswagen. They're invested here. We want them to remain invested. They are creating jobs. But fundamentally, you need to be anchored on domestic skills. And those domestic skills, we are not producing them in their numbers and/or we have not been having a significant pipeline. That's why a lot of you, when you graduate, you look somewhere else for opportunities. We want to change that. The next slide really talks to building what we call the regional interconnectors in the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. There are opportunities going into the continent. Remember what I said to you earlier on, that 51% or 70% of the installed capacity sub-Sahara is in South Africa. So we must evacuate these electrons, support the Zambians, the Angolans, the Namibians to be able to build their own economy. They need electricity. So we need to build these regional interconnectors. We have developed a program to connect the continent. And South Africa will be the anchor of that. That's the point I'm making, and will benefit going into the future. We do anticipate, like I said, our grid expansion and modernization will be about 450 billion. And then the next slide really talks to how we are going to procure that. We'll get private sector to participate. We are going to get the off-balance sheet solutions. We are creating innovative, bespoke financing solutions. We don't want to burden the sovereign balance sheet. We use the deep liquidity that's sitting with the private sector to help us to roll out this build program. And Eskom has been building about 300 kilometers per annum. We have to accelerate that to 2,300 kilometers per annum of new grid capacity. So we must increase it almost eightfold. That's what is required. So for that to happen, the industry must be ready, the skills must be there, and that's a risk to the build program, what I was sharing earlier on. And then the next slide really is just to share with you some of the work that we are doing. Like I said, the nuclear fuel cycle. We mine, it's in solid form. We transform it, that's a conversion. We do the enrichment. We have no ambition of building a nuclear bomb, so we'll not enrich it above 50%. It's for peaceful purposes, it's for isotopes, it's for power, fabrication, reactors, they give us the electricity, we do our isotopes, and then you must dispose of it safely. So that's the nuclear fuel cycle. In all, we are strong where? We are strong on mining and nothing else. We have not built reactors. We are simply looking after the reactors at the Quebec and Safari. So we have not participated in the conversion, enrichment, and fabrication. And the waste, of course, we're building a waste facility. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. And then the next slide is just to make the point that we're building this nuclear capability. The technologies that are there will be partnering with the Chinese, partnering with the French, partnering with the Americans. So the opportunities are galore. That's the point I'm making. Because they have not discontinued their build program, they've been able to build that capacity. They've been able to supply and replenish the pipeline. We haven't done that. So really we're starting from, if you like, ground zero. And that's why the universities are important. We want to partner. Prof will come to you officially, but the students are very important because these are the people who will make this program work. I mean, if you go to the next slide, you'll see there's also technologies that we want to use for purposes of disposal. So we're going to do the central interim storage facility. And what is emerging is to start the deep geological repository where we go deep into the belly of the earth because we are going to be storing this radioactive material on the back of this build program. Of course, it's 20, 40 years later, but it's important that you start that exercise now. Like I said, we'll do 10 gigawatts over time of new nuclear build program. In the immediate, it's 5,200 megawatts, but all of that will be in vain for as long as we don't have the skills. As I conclude the last slide, what are the risks and opportunities? So we have not built anything of significance. The only thing we built is Mudupi and Kusile. We exceeded the costs, gave us challenges, the quality of the work that was done there. It took us time. We were meant to spend about 150 billion rands on both power stations. We ended up paying over 300 billion rands. We were over by more than 100%. And it's because we have not built anything of that significant. So that's the risk you run when you venture into a major build program and you have not taken care of the pipeline. The other one is industry readiness. The example I gave earlier on. Doing the foundational base layers for road construction is different from doing a base layer for a reactor or a deep geological repository of nuclear. That's a different ball game. It's a Champions League of foundation and structural engineering. Do we have those skills? We might have the classroom knowledge, but it's different to have it in practice. None of us have this because we have not done anything of significance over time. We'll resolve the funding and financing, finding solutions on how to do that, and then we must resolve the speed of procurement. So what's the net message I'm giving? Is that your future is here. I mean, if you choose to exercise your right and go to Australia, go to the US, Canada, because they're offering you a better paycheck, I think it would have lost a significant capacity. These things I've announced, and the country will not be able to achieve for as long as we don't have a pipeline of supply. And we hope that you will consider just remaining at home. And I promise you that we are serious about building this economy on the back of our energy endowments. Thank you very much, Subesh. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. We reassure you that we are really taking your challenge and taking it forward towards focusing on creating the new capacity and not only the new, but the present capacity forward for sustaining the infrastructure development of our country. I'd like to invite Professor Quinault, I hope I pronounced it correctly, to respond, please.
Program Director, Minister, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. Minister, this engagement speaks directly to a set of questions that are central not only to government, but also certainly to universities like ours. How do we develop the skills required for a changing energy landscape? This engagement today speaks directly to a set of questions that are central. These questions are not only central to government, but certainly also to a university like ours. So questions like, how do we develop the skills required for a changing energy landscape? How do we align research with national priorities? And how do we ensure that transition to a new energy mix is both just and sustainable? In essence, Minister, it's really the question we ask, how can we be of best service to society? I want to ensure you that at Stellenbosch University, we see our role very clearly in this regard. Through our Faculty of Engineering and specifically our Center for Renewable Energy and Sustainability, and Minister, I can assure you they play comfortably within the Champions League. There's certainly no risk of relegation here. Along with our broader research ecosystem, we are committed to contributing meaningfully to the country's energy transition, developing the next generation of engineers, scientists, and policymakers that will stay here and develop our country and our continent. But we also recognize, Minister, that no single institution can meet this challenge alone. The scale and the complexity of South Africa's energy transition demand strong partnerships between government, academia, industry, and society. You and your colleagues' engagement with us here today is therefore not only deeply welcomed, but also essential. Minister, we hope that today's engagement will deepen collaboration, sharpen our shared understanding of the skills pipeline required, and open up new avenues of cooperation in support of energy security and long-term sovereignty. We are certainly going to take you up on your indication that you want to come and speak to us directly to see how we can contribute to this most important agenda for our country and our continent. And we thank you deeply for starting your engagement here with us today. Thank you.
Minister, we understand that we have only 1 minute to say thank you, and to say thank you to everyone, and of course our Vice Chancellor for being present today, and the leadership of the university as well as the leadership of the faculty. And from all of us here at Stellenbosch University, Honorable Minister, thank you very much, and we hope to see you again soon in presence here at Stellenbosch. Thank you.